I enjoyed Mass Effect 2 quite a bit when I first played it. This is because it developed its character so well while building on the lore of this world. It was also nice to see some of your decisions in the first game impact the story and characters of this game, which made your choices feel like they actually mattered. On top of this, it had some brilliant set pieces, and the final mission is still one of the best missions ever made. However, after my second playthrough of the trilogy and looking a bit deeper into it, this game is actually not as great as I thought it was. This is because it kinda is at fault for Mass Effect 3's messy ending and has some plot threads that don't make sense. This is why I think it's kind of overrated, because most people rate this as the best game in the series when it actually doesn't deserve it. It definitely is a good game, but it has quite a few flaws, which is why I decided to make this review and try to explain why I feel Mass Effect 2 is a subpar sequel. There will be full spoilers for the entire Mass Effect trilogy, so keep that in mind before you watch this. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. The first thing that irks me about this story is how they decided to handle Shepard joining Cerberus, especially if your background was being a sole survivor. Shepard knows that their team was wiped out by Cerberus on a cruise, so why would they want to join with them in the first place? There was no point in the story where you could confront the elusive man, Jacob or Miranda, about this, which was quite a bit of an oversight. What's even worse is that in the Shadow Broker DLC, the Spectre that you are fighting asks why you joined up with Cerberus when they wiped out your entire unit on a cruise, and the two ways that the game lets you respond to that defends the actions of Cerberus, which does not make any sense. So yeah, playing Mass Effect 2 as a sole survivor can really take you out of the experience, which is why I wish they came up with a different solution to combat this issue. Another issue I have with Cerberus is how this game tries to portray them as a morally ambiguous organization. One moment they might be doing something justifiable, but in another scene they could be doing something that seems like it was taken from an evil cartoon villain. Examples would be the Overlord DLC, the whole situation with Jack, the Akuz incident, what happened to Admiral Kahuko, and so on. The worst thing is Cerberus becomes completely evil in the next game, so what was the point of all of this? These are the biggest problems I had with Cerberus in this story. The next thing I have a problem with is how they focus so heavily on the Collectors that there was almost no time to delve deeper into the Reapers. We definitely did learn some interesting things like how the Collectors used to be Proteans, and we got more info on the indoctrination process, but I feel like more could have been done to explore the Reapers and the plans to stop them. At the end of Mass Effect 1, Shepard's next goal was to find out a way to actually stop the Reapers for good. In Mass Effect 2, we should have delved deeper into a way to stop them relating to the Crucible, or maybe learning more about the catalyst that was pulled out at the last moment in Mass Effect 3. Instead, we went on a recruiting spree, learned more about Cerberus, and the main goal in this game was just to stop the Collectors from abducting human colonists. If they focused more on finding a way to stop the Reapers and their true intentions, it would have taken some of the load off on Mass Effect 3, as it had to resolve all of the stories of the new companions, the Cerberus plotline, and the whole Reaper dilemma. Mass Effect 3 had so many things to deal with, which resulted in its ending feeling a bit rushed and underwhelming. Mass Effect 2's plot caused quite a bit of these problems, which is why I don't like it as much right now. And also, the theme of Mass Effect 1 being mostly a space mystery was kind of ignored in this game. In the first game, Shepard was set up as a character that was special because they have the Protean cipher that allows them to understand the Protean language that no one else besides Saren can. Liara was also another useful asset as she had tons of knowledge regarding the Proteans due to her research. Both Liara and Shepard worked together using the cipher and her research to find out more of the Proteans, as well as learning more about how to stop Saren and some knowledge of who the Reapers are. In Mass Effect 1, Shepard did not succeed because they were an overpowered hero. The Protean cipher and Liara's research made this an interesting quest for knowledge that allowed them to triumph over their enemies. They could have used these storytelling assets to push the story forward in a meaningful direction in Mass Effect 2, but what did they do instead? The Protean cipher was not used in this game, and Shepard was now special because they are a hero and icon. Liara's research was also not used in this game as she was hunting the Shadow Broker down and could not join Shepard's crew in this game. They had all of these elements to continue another intriguing quest for knowledge to stop the Reapers, but instead they choose to ignore some of these useful assets in Mass Effect 1 and decided to tell its own self-contained story. In a trilogy, the first story is supposed to set up the premise, which they did, and the second story is supposed to build upon that, which they didn't do. And the third story is supposed to conclude everything. So because Mass Effect 2 did not build upon what Mass Effect 1 did in terms of the Reapers, the third game was in trouble because it had to deal with the build up and conclusion. This is why Mass Effect 3 felt so messy, because it had to be 2 games at once while solving all of the new things that they added in Mass Effect 2, such as the stories of the various new squad mates along with Cerberus. Don't get me wrong though, the plot in Mass Effect 2 still has its moments. I enjoyed the recruitment missions and the loyalty missions as it made you really care for the characters. You also learn more about their cultures, and you can even learn more about their backstories if you romance them. The romance options have been greatly improved in Mass Effect 2, and most of them make certain characters feel even better. Interesting things such as the Quarian-Geth conflict and the Genophage were expanded on in this game through the loyalty missions, which were definitely the best part of the game. I also like how the loyalty missions will determine whether or not your squad mates will survive the final mission, which means the game encourages you to learn more about your squad mates and the world of Mass Effect. The final mission is also so great because you have to make sure you pick the right specialist for the job, otherwise they will die. This is another way the game rewards you for doing the loyalty missions, because if you did them, you'll be able to pick the right people for the job, thus increasing their chances of survival. There are 2 things that bothered me about these recruitment missions though. First thing being what I explained before, where it took up much of this game's focus, which resulted in us not really learning more about the way to stop the Reapers and learn more about their true nature. This also created another burden on Mass Effect 3, where it had to solve all of the squad mates' storylines while also making up for the lack of progress in the Reaper plot in Mass Effect 2. The second thing is that Legion was unlocked a bit too late, even though he had tons of dialogue prepared for the earlier stages of the game. This mistake is more understandable though, as it was made due to the limited disk space on the Xbox 360. So to summarize, the reason I don't like the story as much right now is because it kinda set up Mass Effect 3 for failure by not focusing enough on stopping the Reapers and skipping important build up on them. Some important story elements in Mass Effect 1 was ignored, and it instead focused more on a hero adventure alongside recruitment and loyalty missions, which were good content, don't get me wrong, but it kind of took some meaningful time away that could have been used to talk more about the Reapers, which would have helped Mass Effect 3 as it had to deal with the resolution of all the new squad members, alongside coming up with ideas to take out the Reapers, which felt kind of rushed in the 3rd game. Joining Cerberus also didn't make much sense if you were a sole survivor, and I wish they managed to make Cerberus a more morally ambiguous organization. I'm not saying the story is bad. Its recruitment and loyalty missions build up the characters and focuses on important conflicts such as the Genophage. I just wish it had more focus forwarding the Reaper plot and explaining things in more detail regarding the Catalyst and the Crucible. Or they could have created an even better ending if they decided to focus more on the Reaper plot in Mass Effect 2, and instead it decided to spin its wheels. All of this could have made Mass Effect 3's ending better, but it decided to put more focus on the collectors and the things I mentioned before, which is a shame. The combat in Mass Effect 2 is a bit of a mixed bag for some people. This is because it functions more like a cover shooter when compared to Mass Effect 1, which was due to how much of a glass cannon you were in this game. There is also more emphasis on your squad powers as they recharge much faster, and you need to use them more in the higher difficulties as your guns won't be enough without some help. This differs from Mass Effect 1, where you could take much more damage, which means you did not really have to play it completely like a cover shooter, as it's more forgiving. In my opinion at least, I didn't really mind this change, as I really like the Uncharted games where they also function like a cover shooter. I also like more action-orientated FPSs like Doom, which is why I also enjoyed Mass Effect 1's combat system, as you could run around and gun people down. So you see, I like both of these genres, which is why I didn't really mind this change. But I can get why some people didn't jam with this, as cover shooters are not everyone's cup of tea, especially since Mass Effect 1 gave you more freedom with this, as you could take tons of more damage. At least you can turn down the difficulty in Mass Effect 2 to play it less as a cover shooter, but it sucks for the people who have to do this, as they have to sacrifice difficulty to play more like Mass Effect 1. One thing that was definitely improved is the gunplay, as it feels less clunky when compared to Mass Effect 1, especially if you played Mass Effect 2 at launch. It's not as noticeable now though, as the Legendary Edition patched some of these problems up in Mass Effect 1. However, one thing that I miss a bit is the old weapon system. The RPG mechanics were reduced with you no longer picking up tons of weapons and choosing the ones that have better stats. They mostly got rid of it and just gave us a few different weapons, with some of them having their own unique benefits. There also is an option to strengthen these weapons by simply upgrading them in the tech lab, which is kind of the replacement for the mod system. I know they did this because there was an overload of weapons that you could pick up in Mass Effect 1 and it could get quite messy at times. but I do miss the amount of customization we used to have with the tons of weapons alongside the weapon mods and grenades. The upgrade system that replaced the mods were a bit too simple, as you were just upgrading them to deal more damage and you didn't have to pick and choose them. It will be just more beneficial for you to get every single upgrade, as there are no downsides to doing all of them, unlike the mod system in Mass Effect 1 that encouraged you to think of different combinations. I wish they would have instead tried to improve this system for Mass Effect 1 instead of streamlining it a bit too much, as it still is an RPG after all. But it's not the worst thing to happen, because the weapon mods eventually make their return in Mass Effect 3. The armors also kinda got the same treatment as the weapons, which is a shame. I do, however, like how they made the classic N7 armor more customizable, which is such a great feature since it's iconic and the best armor in the game. There are also new unique looking armors like the Collector armor and the Blood Knight armor that have their own specific benefits as well, but they look a bit ridiculous, at least in my opinion, and the amount of armors have been heavily reduced. They also removed the customization we could do with our squad mates' armor, which is another sad thing, as it's a removed feature that limits the variety of combat. Even though I like the new N7 armor customization, I miss the unique armor mods that I could experiment with alongside the larger variety of armors. This could be done with the squad mates as well too. One thing that is still great about this combat system though is the class variety. Soldiers have the most access to weapons, but their abilities aren't as special as the other classes. Sentinels have great defense abilities but lack the ability to use certain weapons. Adepts can use their biotic abilities to throw their enemies around, but can only do so if the enemies have no armor or shields. Each class has their own unique benefits and weaknesses, which made it a joy to experiment with all of them. Overall, I enjoyed the combat a bit less in this game, as it took away some RPG mechanics that enhanced the first game, but it still does some things quite well, like the diverse class system, cool squad powers, and gunplay that felt less clunky than Mass Effect 1. So yeah, it's still a decent experience because it improved on some things, even though it took away some other things such as the weapon mods and not being able to customize your squad as much as you could in Mass Effect 1. As for the side activities in this game, it's kind of different from Mass Effect 1. First off, before you visit a planet, you have to manually scan it now, and you also have to use it to get some materials. Basically, you have to find out the areas of the planets that have high concentrations of the material you want via the scanner, and then you send the probe to get those resources. It's a very tedious and boring activity because you are just moving your analog stick and shooting probes for hours at end. Don't get me wrong though, at least you get good benefits from this, like being able to afford ship upgrades to make sure most of your crew survives the final mission. You also get to upgrade your weapons and make yourself stronger as a whole. On top of this, I like learning more about the planets before scanning, cause a lot of them have interesting information regarding the galaxy of Mass Effect. I just wish the way we collected these resources was a bit more engaging, because you have to do tons of these, and after a while you will get quite sick of them. As for exploring the planets, it's also different as you no longer have the Mako with you. This has resulted in the planets becoming smaller linear sections, as it would be kinda tedious to walk around the planets if they were the size they were in Mass Effect 1. This is why I miss the Mako a bit despite its jank, because we got to explore some bigger areas even though most of them were kinda empty. I kinda like some of this emptiness though, as it made the galaxy seem like a gigantic place and that you were just one tiny part of it. It added to the theme of cosmic horror that Mass Effect 1 had. Despite these problems though, I still had fun exploring these planets to get resources and learn more about the lore of Mass Effect. It was also a joy to explore the more populated areas such as Omega, Tuchanka, and the Citadel. There is interesting content there that builds the world of Mass Effect, like I said before, and some funny moments like bribing every single store in the Citadel. Overall, I still enjoyed the side content even though there were some things I missed like the Mako and some tedious things like the planet scanning. The content still manages to hold your attention as you are exploring different looking planets while learning more about them. It's also a nice way to get resources to prepare you for the final act of the game. Mass Effect 2 gives me a lot of mixed feelings, which is why I feel like it's a weird sequel. It has some good elements to it, such as the loyalty and recruitment missions that build up the squad mates well and makes you care for them. The combat also is a good time due to its diverse class system, even though some RPG mechanics like the armor and weapon system were stripped. However, the thing that really brings this game down is its main story. It ignored some of the important story elements in Mass Effect 1 and decided to go its own way. It also introduced completely new plot threads like Cerberus and the tons of new squad mates where their stories had to be resolved in the third game. Not only did Mass Effect 2 not build on the Reaper plotline, it also introduced tons of new plot elements that the next game would have to solve. Whenever there's a trilogy, the middle entry is supposed to be building upon the prequel while foreshadowing what's going to happen in the next entry. Mass Effect 2 had no build-up because it went and did its own thing. This contributed to Mass Effect 3's contrived ending because it had no build-up from the second game. This is why Mass Effect 2 is a subpar sequel to me, but still a decent game because it still has some enjoyable elements like what I said before, but it really fumbles the bag when it comes to the overarching story of the trilogy. So yeah, that's how I feel about Mass Effect 2 right now. A decent game but a subpar sequel. But what do you guys think of Mass Effect 2? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and with that being said, this has been 2367 Ruben, signing out.